All right, so today we got some scary news that has been long expected, and it's from Chris Menahan saying Ticketmaster is planning to require customers to verify vaccination status with a digital passport on their smartphones to prove um, virus-free status with a test in order to attend live events, according to reports. Now, again, this is obviously just a report, but it's something that's been long suspected, and it's something that's probably going to happen. It's something that's probably going to happen. And why is that? Is because we still have a lot of people that are paranoid to endless degrees about the whole virus situation, and it doesn't matter how much evidence comes in to make it look not as bad as what we thought it was. They're never going to change their mind. So again, the big thing to point out here, I guess the first thing is the slippery slope argument or point has been proven right once again. It has been proven right once again because again, this is something that we've been talking about for a long time, and it's a very scary precedent. And again, a lot of people hear something like this, and they don't think it's that bad. Oh, it's not that bad, right? But that's the whole point of a slippery slope. And whenever authoritarian measures are ever implemented in a society, they're never done overnight, right? You don't go from a bastion of a free country with endless amounts of freedom to a totalitarian nightmare overnight. I mean, there's probably some examples of that, but it usually the vast majority of the time they take inch by inch until they get that kilometer, rather than just taking a kilometer overnight, right? And that's how they do this kind of stuff. But first, when they first propose it, it seems reasonable to most people, right? It seems reasonable. But when you look back on it, it's like, yeah, we really should have picked up on that, right? We really should have picked up on that. And this is where it is that it starts with stuff like this, and then it's, oh, you need it to travel, right? We're not going to let you into, you're not going to be able to get into most countries without it. And then it's, oh, you need it to have a bank account, you need it to get a job, right? And before you know it, it's not technically forced. This is something that they always mock people for. No one's gonna, the cops aren't gonna come to your house with a doctor, or take you to the hospital and tie you down and stick a needle in your arm. No, that's not how it's gonna work, and that's never. No one's ever said that, right? They love to straw man. Again, how it's gonna work is that you're not gonna be able to get a job. You're not going to be able to travel. You're not going to have a bank account. Again, those are just some examples. They're probably not going to do all of that, but those are just some examples of things they'll come up with. Is that they'll make life so inconvenient for you that you just give in, and that's how the plan. It's how the plan has always came to pass, right? And it'll start out with stuff like this too. It won't even be government kind of things that do it. Like, it won't be the borders office start. It won't be having a bank account. It won't be that kind of stuff. It'll be these kind of companies that do this kind of stuff, right? And then they'll just keep ramping up and ramping up and ramping up until they can't no more. So, yeah. The next thing to talk about here is from Pierre Poilievre, and he says, asked 6 times how much a 1% increase in interest rates would cost the government. Minister Freeland refused to answer 6 times. Maybe she just doesn't know, because again, she has absolutely no background whatsoever in business or finance, so she probably didn't know, to be honest. But if she didn't know, um, the answer is 10 billion, and this is something that, again, you talk to the average person about, and they have absolutely no idea what's going on. Now, this kind of stuff is confusing a little bit when you want to get really deep into it, but the basic point is that interest rates are so low in Canada. I mean, in many places, but interest rates are so low that they can't go any lower. I mean, they can't go any lower, which means at some point they're going to have to go up. But again, the problem when interest rates go up is all of a sudden servicing the debt becomes a lot more expensive, in the point that Pierre Poilievre makes. And number two, the value of underlying, existing bonds go down as well. And if they go up, if the interest rates go up significantly, the value of the bonds go down significantly. So that's another big problem as well, is if interest rates go up, and they should be going up. Like 0.25 is absolute insanity, but again, that's the problem too, is that if they raise them too much, you know, that would be a big issue. But again, if it was a free market scenario, the interest rates never would have gotten so low in the first place. The fact that you have these underlying, banksters that are, arbitrarily deciding interest rates is not really how it works. I mean, technically, yeah, but the reality is, again, is that if it was a true free market situation, interest rates would have risen already to counteract increased government spending, because that's the whole point of it, right? Like, that's how it works for a private individual, right? The more debt you have, the lower your credit rating is, the more interest you're going to have to pay on whatever it is you're going to take out, whether it's a car loan, for example, right? They check your credit rating when you go to get a car loan, and usually the better your credit rating, the better rate you'll get, right? That's basically how it works. And again, that's how it should work for government as well, is that the less fiscally responsible they decide to be, the higher the rates should be to counteract that. And that's the problem too, is that it's not a free market situation, dude. That's the other thing I love hearing these stupid lefties complain about, is, oh, this is another example of the free market not working, when it's literally the exact opposite. Because if it was the free market, we would have significantly high, like, at least, I don't know. I don't know what the exact number would be, because I'm not really an expert on the issue. I mean, I understand it better than the vast majority of individuals, but I'm still far from an expert. I mean, they had interest rates up into the double digits in the 80s, I believe, at least in the States. Again, so it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities that we have interest rates, 10, 20 times higher than they are right now. And again, this would be a 1% increase in interest rates, right? So if they put it to 1.25, right? That's not even high. Like, that's nowhere. That's not even high at all. So again, this is something that people don't realize. Like I always bring up too, is that people just don't realize just how delicate and how fine things are. That even the slightest thing going wrong, and we are in a great. I mean, we arguably are. We are already in a recession. It's bordering on Great Depression levels, because unemployment, debt. I mean, we have a government that's printing up almost $1 billion a day of debt, and yet we still have, look at the how bad of a fiscal position we are in. Like, this is, people just don't realize just how bad things are right now. And I don't mean to be too pessimistic too. I don't mean to be too pessimistic too. This is something that people always bring up. But again, you have to be realistic too. Like, you can't ignore elephants in the room, because people who ignore elephants in the room, that's when things go really, really wrong. Because again, you have all these people that just don't want to admit reality, and that's when, like I say, things go really wrong. So again, a very interesting point by Pierre Poilievre. This is from Frank McVeety. Again, this is something I brought up before. Calgary councillor claimed he was outed from position after refusing to call police systemically racist. Now, again, is that true or not? Honestly, if I had to bet money, I would say very likely. And this is the thing too, that I brought up this story already, but I wanted to bring up a different point, in that the whole idea of systemic racism. Why have we not been given a definitive example, definitive proof of it yet? Why have we not been given examples of it? I really don't know. Now, again, the examples they give up that they usually give are not examples, right? Like, they who is that person? They were talking about the RCMP and how it's so bad, and like the best example that they could give of the RCMP being bad was, like, they make people jump like 6 feet or whatever. I don't remember what the amount was. Like, that's the best example you can give? Like, seriously? Like, it's just pure insanity. And that the reality behind this defund the police, Black Lives Matter movement is that they exist to push a far left agenda, right? Like, they exist to push a far left agenda. If it was about saving lives and ending racism, they wouldn't be worried about the police. They wouldn't, like, you know, if you look at the numbers, if every black person killed by police in the States a year was, like, let's just say it was completely ended, like not one person was killed by police, that's like 0.1% of the black people that are killed every year. Like that's it's less than, no more than 1/1000th, right? Like the vast majority, like the overwhelming majority of black people that are killed every year are killed by other blacks, right? So if they actually cared about saving lives, they would look themselves in the mirror, but they don't want to do that because they want to. The main goal is to push the far left agenda, right? Like them, and this is the thing too, that the reason that they pretend like this is such a huge problem is that they want to sell people on radical change in society, right? Like they want, like, defunding the police, like that's pretty radical change, and the only way that you can convince people to make radical change is if you can have these big massive problems, right? Like they need to make them look a lot bigger than they are. It's the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence example, and that if they want to sell people on this kind of stuff, they have to pretend like, oh, it's this big, huge, massive issue, right? When in reality, it isn't. And the fact that they're outing people that have differing opinions, and the opinion that is right, nonetheless, is very scary. And again, it doesn't end here too. Like people think this is the thing, the problem with the average person. Again, probably not people watching this, unfortunately, but nonetheless, this is the problem with the average person out there these days, is that when it comes to cancel culture, they think that they're just going to go after the crazy people. Like they actually believe that, but that's never how it works. They start out with the crazy people, giving the average person the illusion of, oh, phew, though they're just gonna go after the crazy people. We got nothing to worry about. And then before you know it, they're going after pretty much anyone who disagrees with them, even in the slightest bit. And they're, like I say, they're going to keep ramping up and ramping up until people have had enough. And the reason why I talk about it so much is that I think that it could be too late, right? I think it could be too late in that the crazy people already have too much power to push back enough. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to bring up is from lawenforcementtoday.com, and it's titled "Senator Blackburn Goes After Radical Leftists Looking to Target Trump Supporters with Political Hit List." Now again, this whole, for lack of a better word, hit list, which has been endorsed by AOC in company, it's a pretty scary precedent. In that, just imagine if things were on the reverse, right? Just imagine. It would be, these people are terrorists. They should be locked up for, conspiracy to commit violence or whatever the charge would be. And depending on the levels of evidence, I would say rightfully so, because I don't think simply coming up with a list is enough to. I mean, again, I'm no lawyer, but I don't think that just coming up with a list would be illegal. But it is a very scary precedent because the far left. I mean, for anybody who hasn't been, for anyone who's been living under a rock the last 6 months, has been rioting. Not just a little bit, a lot. Has been committing violence. Not a lot, but a pretty good amount. I mean, multiple people have been killed. That there was a clearly politically targeted attack. There has been hundreds of people killed in these riots and quote unquote protests. So again, um, to say that the slope is slippery here, I think is a pretty fair comparison, in that what they're doing right now isn't necessarily all the worst thing in the world, but it is a pretty slippery slope in that, they come up with these lists before they gain power, and then they gain power, and what do, right? Like, what do they do then? And that's the really scary part. Like, that's the really scary part. So, um, it's something that should be concerning. Like, and the fact that the mainstream media is completely silent about it, I think, is the most concerning part. Because, again, if it was going on in the other direction, it would be the biggest. It would be, front page news. But when it happens in the reverse, nobody really cares. So, just more political double standards that, again, seem to never end. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on All those other platforms, they're all linked up in the description. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I appreciate whatever support I can get. And like I say, make sure, like, whatever support I can get, I very much appreciate.